It's 2025, Dave. And so just because one Fiji turns us down doesn't mean we can't have Fiji on the pod.
Yeah, we fired up ChatGPT and Backstage to generate our very own Fiji.
Fiji, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me guys on. Have to find time these days, somewhere between optimizing banana deliveries and casually reshaping the future of cognition.
You just IPO'd Instacart. What, you don't love groceries anymore?
I do love groceries, just maybe not forever.
That's a pretty wild pivot, though. I mean, most people go from CEO to vacation. You went from IPO to AGI.
Honestly, I want it to be where the next 10 years of product building will happen. And AI it is.
What on earth is CEO of Applications? What does that even mean at OpenAI?
That's pretty much the job. I take the wild stuff coming out of research and turn into product people will actually use.
The translator between sci-fi and spreadsheets?
Bingo.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the special 100th episode edition of the More or Less podcast. I'm Sam Lesson, and I'm here with my good friend Dave Morin.
Hey, Sam.
How's it going, Dave? We're minus two very important people to the show, which is the wives. We're going to see how this goes because
who knows?
They've never let us do this without them. It's very dangerous, literally, for everyone. But, you know, we do have one special guest who's joined us. If you remember on the last episode, for avid listeners, you know, we really realized that Fiji, who's a good old friend of all of ours, would really be the perfect person to join us for the 100th episode special. She's obviously just made some big career moves. You know, she's really, done some amazing stuff. We thought, what a great get. So, of course, we immediately messaged her, and she immediately turned us down and said, saying that she was too busy running two major companies at the time. But maybe once she sorted things out in the future, she kind of free up some time. So we'll wait for that one. But, it's 2025, Dave. And so just because one Fiji turns us down doesn't mean we can't have Fiji on the pod. Absolutely not. So very happy to have our Fiji here. Dave.
Yeah, we fired up ChatGPT and Backstage to generate our very own Fiji. And so here we are. Welcome to the pod, synthetic Fiji.
Fiji, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me guys on. Have to find time these days, somewhere between optimizing banana deliveries and casually reshaping the future of cognition.
I love it. Listen, if the late shows can do it, so can we. So let's jump in, Fiji. You talk to us about the move. You just IPO'd Instacart. What, you don't love groceries anymore?
I do love groceries, just maybe not forever. Instacart was logistics meets survival. OpenAI is imagination meets existential risk. I felt like the right time to move from apples to algorithms. Also, fewer perishables, except maybe my patience.
That's a pretty wild pivot, though. I mean, most people go from CEO to vacation. You went from IPO to AGI.
Yeah, I apparently missed the memo about taking a sabbatical, but honestly, I want it to be where the next 10 years of product building will happen. And AI it is. I'm not done building. I just traded forklifts for frontier models.
Fair enough, Fiji. Fair enough. So what is this? Is this like a tech messiah move or more just like a product management thing you really handle? Like, how are you thinking about it?
Neither. It's just execution at absolute scale, which, let's be honest, is what most visionary jobs are. I'm not here to be poetic about AGI. I'm here to ship.
We bet you will ship, whether it's apples or models. You are definitely someone who ships things. So fair enough. I mean, talk to us a little bit though, Fiji. You must have some sort of pattern on this or backstory. How do you get from groceries to AI? Like what? Like is this like a weird jump? What's going on here?
Not as weird as it sounds. If can manage real-time inventory, cold chains, labor unions, and get someone their oat milk in 45 minutes, you can handle large language models. At least the models don't complain when you're out of oat milk. Yet.
So same chaos, new domain.
Exactly. Just fewer coupons and more people pretending they understand embeddings.
So, okay, let's get into the details though. Like, what on earth is CEO of Applications? What does that even mean at OpenAI?
That's pretty much the job. I take the wild stuff coming out of research and turn into product people will actually use, drive through value.
So you're saying like the translator between sci-fi and spreadsheets?
Bingo. My job is to make sure frontier models don't just live in demos of Twitter threads. They show up in real tools with real impact.
All right. So, what's going to be what's been easier or harder in this transition?
Easier, no more worrying about frozen peas or coupon codes. Harder, defining value when your main product is the future, maybe.
Stakeholders. It's stakeholders. It's all about, that's what keeps it together. It's all about stakeholders.
Here's a time traveling autocomplete. Trust me, not exactly a clean ROI model.
Right. Tried writing a board update with we deployed 70% more magic as your KPI. But we are fixing this soon, finding concrete value drivers when it comes to AI applications.
All right, Fidji, so I have one last question for you. What do you use AI for?
Personally, inbox triage, bedtime story upgrades, and occasionally helping my daughter beat me at creative writing.
But Fidji, I've known you a long time, and you've always been able to respond to messages in like 30 seconds with or without AI. I'm kind of curious, when you say you're using AI to triage your inbox, aren't we really just trying to make everyone as responsive as you already are?
Exactly. We are trying to do that. But if you ask me how I do that, I just basically use my Apple Watch.
Fair enough. Dave, any more questions for Fidji before we let her go?
I think we've about covered it.
Amazing. Well, Fidji, thank you for joining more or less for our 100th episode. This was great. And it's great to be able to have you on, even though we don't have you on. And we'll get another take. Next week, we'll have another person do Fidji until Fidji herself comes on.
Thank you guys for having me. I've been trained on thousands of leadership podcasts, earning calls, Instagram captions, and acting lessons. Thanks for having me.
You know, that's true. Fidji has been trained on all those things. See you, Fidji. Bye. All right, so that was pretty fun to have Fidji on as a special guest on our 100th episode.
Great to have you, Fidji.
You know, when the ladies aren't here, we're going to go a little wild. So we're going to find out what happens next.
Yeah, more or less back next week with a real human, hopefully.
So Dave, I don't know about you, but I just have spent so many hours on airplanes in like the last week. It was like wild.
You're perpetually on airplanes.
This few months, it's been insane. I've been across the Atlantic Ocean 3 times in 6 weeks. And so I flew San Francisco to New York to Frankfurt, and then Frankfurt back to New York, and I'm in New Jersey right now. So that's been like the last, like, I literally did. I was on the ground in Germany for I think about 15 hours, 6 of which were driving. So
I didn't realize you were doing that trip in that time window.
Oh yeah, just it's the classic smash and grab.
One of the things that I think where you're going with this that I've been thinking about a lot lately is just getting on planes just to work, because it's so valuable.
Well, I basically, that's what I was going to say to you, is like the cool part about flying across the Atlantic 3 times in the last literally 6 weeks is the internet works. Like, it's wild. And it's really funny because, I mean, it's not perfect, right? Like, Starlink will be better, but it is definitely good enough for a lot of things. And one of the things I found really quite good enough for is, I think the topic of today's episode is Beyond Fiji, which is vibe coding.
Mm-hmm.
So I've spent so many hours in the last few weeks vibe coding, and I have a lot of feelings about it. I know you've been doing it as well. So I think to get into it, I mean, I think, I'm kind of curious, like, you and I have both been doing a bunch of this, and I wanted to start by maybe asking you a little bit about, like, what you've kind of learned about your favorite tools and what tools are actually working and not working when it comes to scripting stuff in some of the projects you've been working on. Because I have feels, but I'm curious what your take is.
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, there's a lot of conversation going on. I think that the brass tacks of which tools actually work is actually a pretty narrow window.
Yeah, because it's just changing so quickly.
Mm-hmm. But there's also just this question of like what works and what gets the job done. And when I first started doing it, and I was actually looking for this episode like when the first check-in was on my first vibe coding project, and it was well, there's one before this, but the one that I use every day still to this day, I built this app for myself. It started around the middle of July last year. And back then you were mostly just using the state of the art Claude model, and I was actually talking straight to the model most of the time, and somewhat using Cursor and Xcode, and kind of trying to make them all work together. A year forward, you've actually got a lot more integrated tools that you can use. Like Cursor is just like fantastic.
So do you think Cursor? So I'm actually curious. Let's go tool by tool. So let's start with Cursor. Like, I gotta tell you that like I grew up on Sublime. I'm a Sublime guy, right? From like a text editing perspective. I know it's not the most fancy tool. It's not what the cool kids use, but it's just what I've always used, right? And I like it. And I was like, oh, I'll try Cursor because everyone's talking about Cursor. I think it's really difficult to use, right? Like I actually really don't like the sidebar and how it chats back with you and how it updates your files. I find it like extremely hard to follow and then hard to like kind of track, even if you're using Git and like trying to maintain state on everything, because it's trying to make so many changes at once, right? I find it like super hard to manage. Do you like when you use what have you liked about Cursor? Why do you think it's so popular? And I just said as someone who's like been putting hands on it a lot recently, and I'm like not that into it.
Okay, that's a different question than the question of like, what am I using today and why? My general point of view is that none of these tools are actually going to be where this is going to be in the next couple of years, and probably within the next 6 to 12 months. I think you're right. All of the tools, whether it's Cursor, Windsurf, any of the IDE-based tools, they're taking what was the 2010s software engineering model, which largely emerged on top of Visual Studio. I mean, which was kind of for the people that weren't into Sublime or TextMate or like the original kind of text-based code editors that a lot of us used in the 2000s and 2010s. There was like this Visual Studio burst that happened. And so everyone got used to Visual Studio. And so what's happening is a lot of what's being built are these like modifications of Visual Studio, which to some extent don't give enough credit to the power of AI as a technology to help you do the job, right? Like it's kind of a half step, not a full step. And so I just agree with you that the user experience, like the pure UX of doing vibe coding, is still stuck in the 2010s engineering model, and we don't have a tool that's actually the next one.
Yeah, it's just really interesting because like if you think about like the stack I've been messing with or using, and again, like there's like 1,000 of these tools. We'll never call all of them, but it's like I found myself kind of defaulting to this worldview. I actually am using DigitalOcean a bunch, right? For like obviously managing Postgres and then managing, obviously like have like a pretty good app platform that just kind of can maintain, Python apps for you.
You're just using DigitalOcean droplets?
No, not droplets. They have an app. The droplets are fine, but you end up having to manage a lot more of like, reverse DNS shit yourself, right? Whereas like actually they have an app platform that's like one level abstracted up. It's like I actually find pretty good.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, it's actually pretty nice.
I use Vercel. My part of the stack on that is Vercel. I use Vercel for everything on the back end.
And what like does Vercel let you do things? Because and this is where it gets interesting. Is like the thing I found interesting just poking out a bunch of tools with DigitalOcean is like it feels like the right level of control, right? Where it's not like the problem with AWS. I think as like someone who's vibe coding or messing around is like the permission stack and it's so intense that like unless you're like an AWS specialist at this point, I actually find AWS extremely hard to use.
Absolutely. I mean, I think GCP and AWS have this in common. There's so many tools. They're incredibly powerful. And by the way, Azure, all of the core large-scale cloud platforms, they have so many tools and serve so many audiences that it's impossible just to get started.
Well, it's amazing. I mean, they're obviously built for enterprise, which is where the money is. And like, if you're serious and like you care a lot about like security and things like that, there's like obviously like but like if you're kind of just like trying to get stuff done, right? Like they're not the way to go, right? Years ago, it was like Heroku was a way to just like get shit done, and like that's kind of fallen by the wayside, right? And now you have like Vercel, which I've played with, but my understanding is like better for more static stuff, or like I haven't seen as much with like I want and then there's stuff like DigitalOcean, which is like I consider like cheap AWS, right? In a lot of ways, right? In terms of it's just a simpler set of like the core tools you need, right? But at the same time, it is interesting because like in DigitalOcean, like they now do have like, obviously the database layer type stuff is pretty managed and good. There's like the app platform stuff, which isn't just droplets, but now like this app platform. They now have this Gen AI platform stuff, which is actually pretty good, right? Where you can effectively create a knowledge base from a Postgres database, like update it, right? And then like build chatbots that like sit on top of like the knowledge base. Like it's pretty straightforward, right? And so I'm kind of curious, like, I don't know. It's been an interesting learning of like, okay, you have like, I don't know, I'm kind of going in a little bit of directions, but you have like this whole stack of like, what do you host and where do you build stuff? There's a whole thing of like, what models do you use and which APIs do you use, right? Which has been fascinating. I'd love to talk to you about that. There's like the what editors are actually working and like what's the workflow around them. And it's just, you start peeling into these tools and like none of it feels that dialed yet.
It's not. I mean, I didn't even know DigitalOcean was, I was a huge DigitalOcean fan, used it for years for a bunch of different reasons. And then I kind of fell off using it. And then Vercel's become my tool of choice. It solves a lot of the same things that you're referencing.
So can you manage databases in Vercel?
You can. Yeah.
Got it. So they have like a Postgres-y type thing.
They do. They have a Postgres tool. It's new. It makes sense that you wouldn't have heard about it. I mean, it's just, I want to say less than 6 months old, maybe a little bit older. You can easily connect to Neon or Supabase or, a lot of the favorite database tools people are using. You can also just create super fast like blobs and throw things together really quickly.
Can you like deploy like workers and stuff and like background tasks?
Yeah.
Okay. Because that's something that's been really interesting, just kind of actually messing with the guts of this. Is like everyone makes this out to be like some magic thing where you can just boot an app. The reality is like a lot of the stuff you learn like developing websites, right, is still 1000%. Like I don't really understand people like I just vibe coded blah blah and it just worked. I'm like, how is that possible?
It's not.
It's like it's just kind of wild, right, to me. So are people just like lying? Like, because this has been the thing is like I got into this. I've been building this product. I'll tell you what I've been building. The thing I've been building on airplanes, right, is basically a way I really want to be able to like have anyone on the team email in for the creator fund, like random creators that are coming across or like a list of creators, annotate it lightly. Be like, I like this guy, I don't like this guy, da 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 da. Pull it all in, right? Understand what the hell it is. Like that's a creator, that's whatever. Turn it into structured data, drop it in a JSON blob, pull it into a database, extend it like with a bunch of extra research. Like there's just like a bunch of steps you do. And it's just kind of wild to me that like in theory this should be pretty straightforward to do. And it isn't that complicated, to be clear. But the number of services I find myself setting up, it's like, okay, well, I'm using Cloudflare to like pull the email in, then pushing it into DigitalOcean, and then like having a worker go. And by the way, it turns out that you're going to time out on turning even like these emails into JSON because like you have to do it asynchronously. And then because these things are slow.
Timeouts are the vibe code killer, basically.
And then the reality is even the APIs, like it's kind of wild that like I was using OpenAI for a bunch of stuff until I realized that Gemini is like way better at this, right? Like in terms of enforce, like it's just like wild to me that like Gemini is way better. And then you're like, oh, it turns out that like it also understands documentation better. Like there's like all these things you get into like, oh my God, like you're going to be using 6 of these things. And how do you manage which ones you use in which case? Which all brings me back to this question, which is like, is everyone just lying about vibe coding? Because it doesn't feel that different than web development did 10 years ago, right? It's just you have a few more really cool things you can do.
I mean, I don't think people are lying. I think that they're excited. I mean, they might be. I don't know, but I do think people are quite excited because it's possible to describe what you want and get further than you could 10 years ago in mainstream web development. I think 10 years ago, you had to like learn a bunch of things and, maybe there were tools that made it simpler and there was Heroku on the back end, but you still had to understand SQL as a language. You had to understand syntax. You had to like understand how to configure all of these things, right?
But but I agree with you, Dave. And I will say the one thing I've been most impressed with, because I have no patience or frustration for this, is the idea that you can basically get these things to like read and help you with errors in documentation is for sure true. Like it is really, it's great because like you're not going to bang your head. That's 100% true. But when it comes to like, you need to understand web development, you need to understand how these things fit together. Like you still do.
That's true. And in fact, I'll tell you, I have a specific example on this, which is somebody that is in my orbit who was never a engineer, never touched code. They're much more of a marketing person. Saw it as really, it was like Greek to them. Decided to get into vibe coding. I was pretty psyched to see they got interested in this. And it was really fascinating. They brought their project to me and they said, "Hey, I'm having a problem implementing search." And I said, "Oh, well, what's the problem?" And he said, "Oh, I've been using exactly the stack that you just said, Sam. I've been mostly using Claude, and I learned that Gemini is much better. And oh, by the way, I figured out that OpenAI's 4.1 playground is even better. And here's how far I've gotten." And he showed me this iOS app, and he said, "I can't get search to work." And I said, "Show me your code." And so he handed me his laptop, and I looked at the Xcode project. And I said, "What are these gigantic CSV files that are, 20 megabytes?" And he goes, "Oh, that's the database." And I'm like, "Why do you have your data in CSV files? Why isn't it in core data? Like, in order to implement search, you've got to like put it in a actual database, create an index." I sort of explained to him like loosely the general way that you would go about this, just 101. And he looked at me stumped. Like he'd spent 2 or 3 weeks vibe coding this project and learning everything from the AI. And the AI had sort of moved him in this direction, and he didn't realize that that a database was even necessary. He didn't even understand the concept of a database. So like the abstraction level that you and I are even talking about now on this podcast is like beyond where the general AI tools get a newcomer to today. And so he's excited. He's got an app that works.
Yeah, it's sort of, and like that's it. I think the thing is like, look, the things that it obviously does, the error, like I just paste random fucking errors in, and it guesses reasonably well what the errors are. Sometimes it's very wrong, and then like you spend time, it'll kind of like do anything. Like the AI will just agree with you into a corner, right? And so it'll take you in like weird directions, or if it starts pushing in one direction, it's like literally everything we're seeing in society is like it'll just like push you all the way out versus like actually having a broader perspective on things.
Yeah, these things are snowballs. I think that's the thing that people don't realize generally about AI is it will snowball in the direction that you send it in, right? And you're kind of feeling around in the dark. You're like building with Lego bricks in the dark, and you don't actually know what's being built until like the lights get turned on.
Look, I mean, there are things like it is fun and cool that, for instance, the problem of, hey, just throw random creators at me and like I'll let an AI job figure out what the hell is what and like structure it and return JSON. Like that's cool and like pretty hard to do, right? So like that's a thing. Like it's effectively like structuring data, or hey, I don't really want to write a bunch of SQL with a bunch of conditionals. Like there's a better, just like brute force it. Like there's all sorts of things that like AI does seem pretty useful for. But I've been really shocked about how like, I'm having a lot of fun building this and kind of trying to like iteratively upgrade it into what I want. I totally agree. The cool part is you can get like a tiny prototype working in like a second and be like, oh shit, this would work, right? And like that's exciting. But it is kind of wild that like there just seems this massive mismatch between what these tools actually do, how you can actually use them and stitch them together, right? And like what people seem to be excited about, right? And I don't know. I'm just not sure how to think about that.
I just think that's right. But it's also opportunity, right? Because I think that the exciting thing is that we can build a bunch of new tools, right? Like I was playing with Google's I think it's called Firebase Studio. Like nobody's talking about it, but it's like wildly better at a lot of the things that we're talking about. They also released this new tool. I think it's called Jules. OpenAI's got a new tool that you can do 5 things at once with. And you're actually starting to see a glint of like, oh, I can configure something. I can, configure this TypeScript script to run on a, timer over here in this task. And then over here, I can get a bunch of bugs fixed. And then over here, but still, to your point, I still have to know what I'm doing with like web development and all the components of a web development system. It hasn't abstracted that away from me yet.
Yeah, I'll tell you the interesting thing that I've been thinking a lot about too, because I basically been working with, and like, is you basically have to be really careful about state management right, on these things. Because what happens is like it's this weird split world, right, where like if you're like building something and you like ask a question, it's like, hey, give me like what you think I should do here, and it gives it to you, and then you modify that or don't do it exactly the way it intended, it then loses track of what you did, right, and then you end up with like this mess of a problem where like it's like telling you to do X, but you're actually, it's like I found that very challenging. And so it actually, I'll tell you the long way of getting back to it is, it actually increasingly makes me feel like really the GitHub advantage is so deep, right? If you're committing all your, it's like so deep, because all of a sudden the amount of the difference between I have to keep telling you the changes I made so that you don't lose track of them in like what you're recommending, versus like, because you're just like, you actually own my production code effectively, is like pretty massive, right? And so again, I've always had this model of AI, which is the rich get richer and the incumbents get stronger. This is another place where like I understand how you in theory could do that through an IDE as well, right? It's like a different, like, which is why the cursor story, at least theoretically, makes sense. But to me, it's like the source of truth is whatever I'm committing to GitHub, right? And so it just seems like it just becomes even clearer to me that like the winner in like, oh, I have to know what your app actually does. I need to know what the files are all named. And you know, if you change this config variable somewhere, it's wild to me watching Gemini, which is pretty good. And I've actually been very impressed with Gemini, much more than I expected to be. I've kind of moved mostly to using Gemini for stuff, at least this type of stuff. But it is wild to me that you just like that state management is a huge problem.
Have you noticed that on your point about GitHub, I had a PR that I put in a couple days ago, and I hadn't noticed this before, but they've got a new feature that is effectively like a pair programmer. It's like an AI co-pilot that will check the code for you before you deploy. And I hadn't seen that. I don't know why. I think it's because I mostly don't use GitHub on the web interface. But one of these new tools I was testing made me look at the web interface, and I noticed that feature. And so I had it check it, and it was like it passed, and I was like, okay, cool, great.
Yeah. Well, you can do, yeah, and you've always been able to like create like side scripts or whatever to like test. There's been a whole platform around some of that stuff before, but it is interesting. It's like,
this is just a button though. It's just like,
that's cool.
Have Copilot check your code. I was like, yes, do it.
Yeah. But it's interesting also because like, you know, in programming, people always talk about like the rubber ducky thing, right? Where if you're like stuck, you know, you explain the problem to a rubber ducky. This is again like 20 years ago when the ducky couldn't talk back, right? And like, I do think that like purely letting the ducky even talk back, right, which is like the most basic, which is like clearly good, right? Like, and I think it's been an interesting transition. And I do think what it is like, it does feel like a lot of these things apply in lots of places. Like software engineering or building things, I feel like it's such an obvious place to experience where things really are, because there's so many advantages it has. Like it's an enormous public library to work from that like everyone has access to. You know, you can actually run the code, and so things like you can prove things are true or not true. Like the validation is pretty good, right? So it's obviously the lead use case around AI is going to be this like closed loop programming type stuff. But it is interesting. It's like, yeah, I kind of want a rubber ducky in life. That rubber ducky does work for coding. It'll work for other decisions, but the rubber ducky will take you down some terrible rabbit holes if you let it, right?
Okay, so here's an interesting way maybe to think about this, which I hadn't thought of until this conversation. But we've talked about in the past that there's like these two worlds kind of emerging, where there's like the social media world. And in social media, there's like this set of tools, right? You can get on Instagram or TikTok or whatever, and they've got these like prosumer-ish video editing tools, and you can tell a story, you can tell short stories, you can tell a lot of stories in a row. There's a lot of different types of storytelling you can do with these tools, but you really can't make Mission Impossible with these tools, right? Like you can't make like a feature length film. You can't, there's a lot of storytelling forms which you cannot accomplish using these tools. And so that's the thing that everything you're describing makes me think of, because I'm kind of looking at what's going on in vibe coding. You're right. Everyone on Twitter is like super excited. They're like, oh my God, I vibe coded this, I vibe coded that, and check out my new app I made. And it's kind of like social media coding, right? Like versus I'm actually, I'm involved in a couple projects, and one project in particular, which is like a very serious software engineering project, trying to do world-class user experience work, like really what I would describe as like movie making in technology land, right? And I'm working with people who are like some of my favorite people to work with. Everyone is like full stack, knows product design, engineering, software. And everyone's like checking things out with, using these tools, and they're using Gemini for like very narrow use cases. But at the end of the day, to produce what is considered in the world to be like the highest quality software, no one's vibe coding their way to it.
Well, I think this is a really cool analogy, Dave, and just to push you on this, because I think it's a cool way to think about it, is like if basically vibe coding or whatever is like the memes or the disposable media equivalent of social media versus like an important film. Here's the problem. We know in the media world, what's winning is like memes and the social media stuff. And it turns out no one watches movies unless they're Marvel movies, right? And like I've been trying to do this like $100,000 documentary project. Like, how can I have high quality content for me and my friends, and like that are more narrow, awesome stories that are more produced because I want it. And like I think there's a market for that. It's like, but it is an interesting thing, which is that if you're right, and if that's the direction we're heading in, right? The question is what dominates.
Or can they just both coexist, right? I mean, just look at ChatGPT, right? Like there are going to be big new apps that play the big game.
But here's the thing, I'm so much more, I've always obviously been fairly negative about the value of foundation models, right? Like from a business standpoint and like the ability to like break in. But like, I got to tell you, like having spent like a lot of plain hours playing with this stuff and doing nothing else, I like am so much more negative, right? On like ChatGPT. It's fine, right? It's fine. And like, so is like they're all fine. And it was really interesting when I realized that like, okay, I wanted to transition off. I was using ChatGPT. Like, it was actually very funny. I had funny experiences because like ChatGPT describing how to use ChatGPT is like consistently wrong, right? Like it kept correcting me. I was like away from using the 4.0 model. It was like, no, you can only use 4. I'm like, that's not. Or it was like changing syntax.
Wait, are you talking about just to clarify for everyone, like, are you talking about general just use cases or software engineering specifically?
Well, I was starting with software engineering. I was like, okay, I moved over to Gemini, and like it was a very seamless transition to just be like, well, I'm just gonna like move over to Gemini, both from a coding perspective, but then also like actually making API calls with it. It was just like even easier than I thought it would be, right? Then what was interesting is I started using it, and I was like, there are a few use cases where in my head, I was like, oh, I can just use ChatGPT for like the real-time web. And it's like, no, you can't, right? But you can use Gemini, right? Like, and are there something, and like, so it's just this really interesting thing when I'm like, I don't think, obviously the answer is number go up across the board. Like everyone's getting, but when it comes to like, are these things valuable and like, what's the defensibility and who makes money on these or whatever? Like I've actually come out of this exercise more cynical even than I was a month ago, right? Or even a few weeks ago, that any of these are going to be good, sustainable businesses, despite the fact it's clearly going to be everywhere in the air. It's the same with like app problems. It's like, look, I really like using DigitalOcean right now, right? But like, there is nothing defensible about it. It's like everyone just has like the AI service. You know what I mean? Like it's just not, and it is all still just like web services in the end of the day.
So interestingly, I was looking at the announcements from Google yesterday.
Making it newsy. Yes, you should do this. The ladies will be proud.
Well, there was 1,000 things going on yesterday. God bless Google. They are like a technological powerhouse. They can just output an unbelievable amount of software. And I think that's why Gemini is winning for your software engineering time, right? Like they're just an enormously good software engineering organization. When it comes to like understanding what they said yesterday, I was like, I think I need an LLM to interpret everything.
Totally.
The only thing that stood out to me yesterday was that they are charging $250 a month for Gemini Pro. And this comes back to the conversation we had on the pod 2 or 3 pods ago, where I was making the comparison about these AI companies and business models, that they are like computers. They are not like services. Like I buy ChatGPT Pro because I want to have the best computer to use for my, everyday life. Just like I buy a new MacBook once every 2 years or a new phone every 1 year. I want to have the best compute in my life to be at the state of the art in terms of doing my work every day, right? And so I'm already paying $200 a month for ChatGPT Pro for that reason. And when Gemini comes to me and says, okay, now you need to pay $250 a month to get Gemini Pro. Suddenly, this decision becomes very clear and very obvious that I'm only going to choose one of these things.
Oh, really? I was going to go the other way, which is I'm just going to buy them all.
See, but like, I don't think I am. And I'm like you, Sam, like I'm willing to buy the compute. I want to have the best compute tools. But like at $200 a month, I mean, I guess maybe if you're looking at it as a business expense, it's probably fine.
Yeah, you got a fun. You just, it's free.
At the same time, these are high prices, right? Like that's over $1,000 a year. Like it's like a, super expensive. And so like, are people going to pay for both of these?
Well, okay. So here's the other thing. I had this like thought last night in Frankfurt when I was trying to go to sleep at 6 p.m. local time. And I was like, the problem with these LLMs, all these new models, because even within Gemini or ChatGPT or any of these guys, they have like a bajillion models. Like, what model should I be using, right? It's kind of, the analogy I came up with was like, it feels like all these new people, like imagine if they were like experts in your life, right? Like you go to a cocktail party, you meet like 50 new experts, and there's another expert and another expert, and you have no idea who's actually an expert in what or who's good at what. They're just like disembodied voices. There's no like there's no like social media style reputation. There's nothing built in where I'm like, oh, I'm going to talk to Bill. Bill's the real expert.
See, this is the only thing that I disagree with you on, because your description of why you're becoming more cynical about ChatGPT is actually the reason I'm becoming more optimistic about it.
Because you think people will just trust ChatGPT because it was there first. It's like ChatGPT is your old friend.
No, it just knows more. Like the way that they have architected it, and I get that other people can do it, but I'll tell you, I've actually tried. I tried what you just described this week several times, where I asked the same question to both, and ChatGPT always answers better in context, like in a way that makes me feel like the work is better than what Gemini answers for me. Not in code, but like more general purpose queries.
But even, okay, so a more general purpose query. So I was experimenting with this too. It's like I was in some random city in the middle of Germany, like 2 hours, like literally random city. Very beautiful. And like, I was like, what is there to do here? Like I have 3 hours to kill. And it gave me like something that was like straight out of TripAdvisor. Like, in Gemini, ChatGPT. Now, here's the thing about that. I think it's a possibility that there actually just isn't better public answers. You know what I mean? It's like, go to the church. Try this place. This place is old. You're like, that actually probably is the best answer that exists in the public internet. I believe that, right? Like, but it was just like, wow, this doesn't, I mean, it's doing the best it can, but like, I don't care about any of this stuff. Like, I'm not wowed by it being like magically in context. You know what I mean? Like, at all.
That's not the kind of context I'm talking about, Sam. I'm talking more about, I think what you're referring to is state management. Right? Like at the end of the day, none of these tools are going to be any good if they don't know, yes, about the context of where you're standing, but also something about you, something about your internal state. Like, what are you thinking? What have you thought? These types of things.
I agree with that. But here's my thing to you on that, Dave, which is like, this goes back to I've made this point on the Twitter or the X many times, which is like, I think it's just too easy to export and import for there to be any lock-in on it, right? Like, it just seems extremely easy to say, give me the file of Sam or what you know about me and pass it. Now, if you said, no, it's like not a GDPR world, we're going to like hoard the who is Dave information and like, we'll never tell, then like that's different.
That's what a lot of these platforms do. I mean, you can't really get everything out of Google. You can't really get everything out of Meta.
No, well, I'd say you actually, so here's the thing. Historically, the way people did this is to say, okay, you can have everything because we kind of have to comply. It's hard, but we're going to make the file structure so broken, you can't work with it. You actually can't do anything with it. So like, here, congratulations, here's all your friendships or what are tweets.
And we're not going to give you the thing that really matters. Like, we're not going to give you all the friends. We're not going to give you,
But that was always like a negotiation back and forth. And the obviously the cycle changed on a bunch, but like now it's like, there's like, here's some like really difficult to use format. The funny thing about LLMs is like LLMs are excellent at this. Like if you just like download your Twitter data right now and you're like, hey, can you just like give this me in like one flat file? Like they'll never give it to you that way. They'll give it to you in like a bunch of pieces you can't use. But like the LLMs are really good at reconstructing this stuff. And so I actually think data portability goes way up because you can't use file formats to like break things anymore. That just means there's going to be incredible portability between these things.
I mean, maybe I just need to try that because I haven't done it. I haven't tried to export everything out of ChatGPT. My understanding is that they do it, but I kind of think this is the same thing as my previous metaphor, which is that if these things are more like computers and operating systems, where I've chosen to use Apple, right? And so I have all my photos and all my other stuff like in my Apple. Yes, I could export all my photos and take them to Google or take them to other places, but practically, I don't actually do it because it's hard. It's like hard enough that why, right? And the value provided by the other thing is like kind of the same. So like whichever one knows more about me is the one I'm going to stick with.
I get it, but I think the counter argument to that is a fewfold. One is like, what actually, like, take photos is a funny example. Like, I personally have it all mirrored everywhere, right? Like, I have all of my photos in Apple and I have all my photos in Google, right? And they just have all of them.
I used to, but the Google stuff just stopped working and I like could never get it to work again.
So it works for me, and I actually primarily use Google, but it doesn't really matter to me. Like, I'm glad they both have them. It's fine, right? Like, so that's like one option. The thing is, it's like, I think this is an interesting question. Is like, are they more like computers or are they more like people or relationships, right? If they're more like computers, yeah, maybe you choose you're a Mac guy and you like the blue bubbles and like it all is kind of the same, but like, there's a tax you can extract for high design. Talk about Jony Ive in a second, right? Like, fine. But I honestly, when I just think about like having just spent a bunch of time talking to these models and trying to solve problems with them and ask questions, it's like, they really, to me, just feel like characters in my life, and they've certainly been branded in that direction. And to that end, it's like, I don't like, you're going to want to talk to different people about different things. You're going to have a new guy's going to roll around, the new kid in town who actually might know more about something. And like, you're like, well, shit, should I get an answer from him too?
You know what? I like this. I like this framing. And this actually maps to, so I was taking a pitch this week from a it was a pitch, but it was a founder that I've invested in several times before. And we funded his last company. And for a bunch of reasons, they're splitting the company in two and creating a new company. And so he was explaining to me his experience of starting this new project. And it sounded exactly like what you just said, Sam. And I felt it was a new experience listening to him, what I was hearing. And what he described was, I am a solo co-founder. I'm a solo founder right now, but I don't feel like it. I feel like I have co-founders, and my co-founders are, and he described the 5 different AIs that he built. He's got one that he built for code that actually talks to all the models that we've already talked about today. Sure. He's got a marketing model that he built. He's got a finance model that he built. He's got a founder wellness model that he built that reminds him to work out and take care of his health because he's a solo founder. Otherwise, he won't do it. And he's built this whole kind of constellation of personas, people that he feels are actually making him successful. And from what I can tell, the product that he's built in, just around 6 to 8 weeks is really extraordinary. Like, it's super well done. And so there's like a meta layer above the vibe coding. It's like your vibe, your vibe community that is like the group of bots you're talking to that kind of give you energy, right? And like, that's like a new thing in the world.
I agree, but here's the thing I'm trying to wrap my head around. I'm sure I'll turn to a screenshot essay when I can think about it more clearly. Is
Are we going back to the business model question? Like, if this is the case, like, how do you build a business?
Well, no. I was going to say, actually, it's actually something near and dear to, I know, both of our hearts, and certainly mine deeply, which is like, I actually think this is a big identity problem, right? Which is like, if you think about these AIs and all these like models, is like they're just all these people that are popping off into the world. They're just like new people at parties, right? Like, I don't know who the fuck is legit and who isn't, who to trust. I don't want to waste my time talking to some fucking lunatic. And like, if you think about it as like you just walk into a crowded room and there's like 1,000 models, like, I don't know where to spend my time and who to chat with. Like, I do think there's like something going on around an identity problem and like reputation, and that becoming more of like a who's using what and who's edibles. Now, look, obviously there's a bunch of people doing benchmarking and like trying to do this in like a very professional way, but I think there's something that is missing, right, around being like, I don't even care about the models. Like, it's kind of like, what is the network of these things where I'm like, oh, I should definitely use this because all the people I trust is using this, and like, this is the good one. And they all vouch for the fact that like Steve knows science, and I'm not going to end up talking to like the intern who's a lunatic in the corner.
Ooh, I have a good example of this. So one of the people on our operating team, there was a get together at the Giants game last week. And one of the people that was there was from another fund that you and I both know. And she said, hey, I have this GPT that I built for this very specific reason. You should use it to answer your questions. And so it was not dissimilar to going to the Giant Stadium for a SVB happy hour 10 years ago. But instead of being introduced to someone, you're now being introduced to a bot. And this person on our team was like, this bot really helped me answer this question and specifically helped me write a better prompt that I could then go and take to
another bot.
Well, the bot that knows everything about our firm, right? Like we've built a very sophisticated internal tool set. And so now she got a better prompt out of this out of this bot that she got introduced to at the baseball game.
Yeah. So it's just like, they're just like, bots are people too. It's like, that's not a novel concept. Like people have been talking a lot about having relationships with these bots and like
I understand that, but this is like real, like they're starting to get introduced into there's a subtle difference here.
I think the important difference is this, which is like, in some ways, like people have thought of these bots are going to be like social media stars, you know what I mean? Or like, we're going to make the Snoop Dogg bot and like, you're going to love this bot. So you'll fall between networks or whatever. But I actually think there's like, that's not the hard problem with, if you just think about them as people, right? That's not that's like the challenging problem is, I'll call it like the crowded room problem, which is like, you just showed up at college. You walk into the common room and you're like, I don't fucking know who to talk to, right? And like, by the way, it's actually expensive because it's interesting, especially if the expectation is like, imagine walking into a crowded room of people you don't know and just being like, I guess I'll just trust the person I talk to first, right? You know what I mean? Or like, oh, I'll just and like, you're like, oh fuck, the world expert was 3 people over. You know what I mean? Like, there's just like this entire network mentality of like, how do you know who to interact with and what to use that I think is just like important and doesn't exist.
Is it just NPS all the way down? You know, right? Like at the end of the day, like why do we all use ChatGPT? Why do most people in the world use ChatGPT? Because someone told them that it did something cool for them.
And they also because they don't know any better, right? Like they use it because it's like the best. It's like, you know, it's like, why do you buy Kleenex or some shit?
Yeah, but it's good, right? It's good enough that enough people referred it to each other.
It's good enough. And like, that's the interesting question is like, there's this good enough curve, right? The problem is lots of things will be good enough. Lots of things are good enough. So you get the brand is good enough, but it turns out if everything's good enough, very hard to build a business around that because when someone's gonna be like, I need $200, you're like, hey, by the way, I'm also good enough. Give me one shot. I'll do it for half price. It's not a great business.
So Sam, it sounds to me like what you and I should get off this podcast and seed is the glass door for AI bots.
Yeah, but Glassdoor is a shitty product. Like, what I want to seed is like,
it's a great business.
Is it a good business?
I think so. Like, how do the marketplace of like reputation and identity amongst all bots, like that something is going to happen like that, right? Like, you need to know like this bot added a lot of value to like 1 million people or in this way, right?
Yeah, but here's the thing, Dave, is I think that's the right mentality, but I think like the Glassdoor-y, reviewy mentality isn't kind of where I land on this. I think it's much more like, I care what people I think are smart are using.
Well, that's what I mean. You want to know brass tacks data.
No, but I don't actually want data. I want to know what I want to know what like Dustin's using and why. Like, not what he says he likes, like what he's actually using. I want to know what you're using and actually consistently. I don't give a shit what the average person's using because I think the average person's pretty stupid. Like, what I want is like a network, right? Which tells me what's in production for whom or who's using what for, and not just like broadly, not like I use ChatGPT or I use 4.0. That's not enough. I want to know for these types of questions in this type of way, this is what's useful to me, right? And like, these are all characters. So then that's like the router and the reputation I care about. So it's not like 5 stars. It's more like in the context of my network and what I care about and who I know right now, because it's going to change really quickly. Like, these are the people to talk to.
Yeah, I guess that's Glassdoor is maybe the wrong metaphor, but what I meant was, in a 2025 world, like you should actually be able to see just like this bot is used by this many people. It's used by people of this quality, like it's added value for them. It's worked on this code base, that code base. Like that stuff's all in GitHub right now, by the way. Like GitHub's actually becoming aware of which bots are adding the most value.
Yeah. So again, this maybe this all gets back to where we kind of end where we started, right? Which is, it turns out that like spending a bunch of time on airplanes vibe coding and building fun stuff that I have a lot of fun doing, but actually like really getting to the guts of these things and building web services again in like a pretty fun way. Cause like, I'm not a real engineer, neither are you. We're like, we're capable, right? Like, and we like to play, but we're certainly more capable than 99% of the world, probably 99.99%.
Certainly makes me much more dangerous now.
It does. It's more fun. It's more dangerous, the whole 9 yards. But like, my kind of net on this whole conversation is actually where we started, which is like the incumbents are going to crush it. Like GitHub is going to crush it, because if you think about like the real places where there's leverage and blockers, right? It really is going to be like, who's actually deploying my production code because they actually know it's up, or like, who knows? I don't care what people say. I care who's actually using what in what cases in production. And like, people like GitHub know that, right? AWS knows that. You need to deploy the code to own it.
Yeah. I mean, I also just think there's a massive jump to be made in terms of the UX of how this vibe coding goes down, right? Like the prompt management, for example, like is something we didn't talk about at all this episode, but like managing diffs across all the different prompts you've tried, like there's so many problems, like it's like ridiculous.
Well, it turns out Git's really good, but yes, I mean, I think like, I'll give you an example like of Jen's like, why can't these? So like, I was setting up as like a Flask app to like do stuff because that's like the easiest way to do some things, and like, it's just basically these chatbots, all of them, ChatGPT, using Gemini, whatever. They're just like hammering everything into one file, and like, please don't do that. Like, can we please like split this up into like a little bit more service? Like, I don't want to go crazy, but like, you need to like give me like blocks that I can then kind of like think about logically. It's just, and it's very interesting because I understand why that's like the default path of a lot of these things, right? From a like just get it done vibe codey perspective. But even with like 1 second of forethought, being like, oh, I want to extend this or do something else, you end up very much back in like traditional software engineering, right? Like separation of concerns, like type stuff, which, is how you have to manage this stuff, right? And I just don't buy that like we're anywhere near this like magic box, right, that makes it go all away, We're definitely near the place where like it's easy enough for people who are somewhat technical to build things that like I totally buy the like SaaS is dead story, right? Like you'll like this in terms of SaaS is dead. You know what I spent time doing on an airplane is like, I had a bunch of like simple stuff running through Zapier, right? Just because I was like, like it's easy, but I ripped it all out. I was like, I don't need this anymore, right? Like Zapier just like gets in the way, right? And so you're like, it's just, and like they're trying to obviously go into the coding part, but I was like, I'm just like Python. It's just Python. Like, can we get rid of this shit?
I did the exact same thing. I ripped out every Zapier integration anywhere in our code base for offline. You can just replace it. It's like super easy. Like there's no point.
Yeah, you just pull it out, and then you're just like, it's the same thing. Like there are things like, for instance, I think Cloudflare is like so well set up, right? Because it's all scriptable. Like it's great. And so it's really interesting how there is like these subtle tool changes, but it's all going to bias towards like a less interface and less clicking.
Totally.
All right. Well, that was a conversation we would not have had with the women, which is not, I guess that sounds really gendered. It's not meant to be. It's just, I think we care more about this than they do.
Yeah, for sure.
What else happened this week before we close? Google I/O, a lot of cool stuff, but who cares? That was kind of my take. You know what I mean? Like, it's just, there's now just like big tech, and big tech does big tech things, right? And like, it's kind of like good. You're like, yeah, like now you can make some movies and now some things in glasses. Like they did the things you'd expect them to do.
Yeah, it's a good point. I was thinking about a version of that, which is that these guys all have such enormous capital bases that I just want them to do fantastical, futuristic sci-fi things with some of their capital. And I guess Google is doing that with Waymo, right? But, Apple's like returning $100 billion to shareholders. Meta is doing some stuff, but they're all just kind of doing the same thing, and they're all just competing with each other and copying each other's ideas. And you like rarely get like a fits and starts of something truly fantastical, and they're the ones that have the resources to do it.
I actually have no problem with them just doing business. And I'm just like, yeah, like there's this thing called big tech, and it competes with itself. Someone gets a little ahead, they all catch up. It's all incredibly good business. They're fine. You know what I mean? Like I'm like good with it, right? But it just, I kind of look at the Google I/O stuff and say like, yeah, like they're doing big tech well. And like you have the influencers or people being like, oh my God, Google just took away like language learning. And you're like, yeah, like of course they did. Like why? Like what? Like obviously that's like, what science fiction are you reading? Like obviously this just gets subsumed, right? And we all knew that was going to happen, so they make it happen, right? Great, someone needs to do it. And then I guess at the other extreme you have this Jony Ive $6 billion acqui-hire, which is kind of wild.
Yeah, I mean, do we classify OpenAI as part of the big tech? I mean, you kind of have to now, right? Like these are numbers that are, it's big tech, right? Like I have all these people in like the seed ecosystem that are like flittering about being like, oh my God, how did I not get into this? And I'm like, it's really simple how you didn't get into this. Like this thing was funded at a level so far beyond seed that like you would have never been involved in the first place.
I mean, that's obviously my pattern, which is like AI broadly is like not a good seed investment opportunity, full stop, right? But I don't know. I think the problem with OpenAI is that it's caught in the middle, right? Which is like it. Sam's done an amazing job as a capital raiser, and he's certainly playing the big tech game, right? In terms of just like, can I raise enough money to keep up with the big boys? But there's a big difference between raising the money versus having the machine that prints the money out, right? In terms of like it depends how long the race is.
We should have asked Fidji more about that.
Maybe Fidji, the Gemini version would have. That was, I think, the ChatGPT version of Fidji. We'll need the Gemini version. But I just think it's like really difficult to compete. I think they're in a very awkward place, right? Because and so like for instance, they're going to do a hardware thing. Yeah, of course they're going to try. Hardware is so hard. You know what I mean? Like I put their probability of them succeeding at hardware so low, but they still have to try, I guess.
I don't know. I'm psyched that they're trying, and the intention behind why they're trying, they said it, I thought, quite plainly this morning, which I deeply agree with, and I've talked about a lot on this pod. But we are in a moment right now where people's relationship with their phones in particular is deeply like filled with negative emotion, right? Like people want out of the ecosystem. It's like the combined ecosystem of social media and phones, I think, has people exhausted and searching for an out. And so I'm glad someone with a lot of resources is going after it.
Well, I will say though, yes, but I have to say, and this will be my final point of the day, and then you should close this up, is you know what phone technology has been crushing it this week?
Which one?
The Methaphone.
Oh, I did see that. That was amazing. I didn't realize. I saw that and I was like, oh yeah, Sam talked about that.
The Methaphone has gone hyper viral.
Who was it? Was it Antonio? Is that who built it?
Antonio started it, and he's made it. But like literally, I'll tell you two stories. One is like it's now crossed like 100 million views on TikTok, and it's like becoming popular and known. Like there's like Google it. It's like wild. Like it's always fun when you get to be at the start of something that goes like hyper viral. This is going hyper viral, and it's good and funny and great.
What's the story of how it started?
You'd have to, let's get Eric Antonio on to talk about it next week, and he'll give us the Methaphone story. I don't want to take his story from zero, but he brought it to a dinner, and I got really excited about it. Again, this is his thing, not mine, but it's pretty sweet.
But how did it go viral? Like what caused the virality?
So some influencer posted on TikTok a funny video of her like holding it in line at like a coffee shop that went like nuts, and then like because that went nuts, all these other things went nuts. It's a great meme internet story, right?
I think that points to what I'm talking about, though. There's a very deep, it's like a latent energy.
I agree with the cultural moment.
There's like a latent energy out there that wants something, and there's no solution.
It's global. I mean, this is what one of the people. Again, I don't want to steal stories that are not my story, but like. Someone recently like came up to someone with a Methaphone in Europe and was like, "Is that a Methaphone?" And like they're like, it's like wild. It's like gone global. There's like global demand for something new. That's true. Anyway, anything else on your mind?
I guess yeah. To close this out, I don't know. I guess like underneath all the noise about AI and AI infrastructure and all this stuff, there's like this thing which is like people don't build things to, I think, just deploy code. I think they're building things because they're trying to say something usually, and they're trying to like communicate something they care about, or to like create beauty, utility, something, connection with other people,
or control things. They build things to control things.
Yeah. And it's like, I think that's really why people are so excited about vibe coding. It's like there's this like quieter revolution going on that's like people are learning how to express themselves through software and building like little worlds and GPTs that feel like co-founders and like personal apps that do things for them in their own lives. And so it's like yes, like GitHub will probably win this revolution, like you're saying, but there's like this like quieter thing going on, which is like, it feels like people are gaining some control over their ability to express themselves in this like internet world that we've all been participants in for a long time. And like, that's kind of cool.
Yeah, especially the ugly people who like don't give clicks on TikTok. It's like vibe coding is posting on social media for ugly people.
Oh man. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. Never know what's going to happen next.
You never know what's going to happen. Dave, always good bullshitting with you. 16 caffeine deep on the East Coast.
Get some sleep, man.
That was a weird 100th episode. I bet no one will listen to this, but I had fun.
We'll see. You never know. We're always wrong.
Always wrong. Bye, Dave.
All right, guys. See you next week.
If you enjoyed this show, please leave us a virtual high five by rating it and reviewing it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. Find more information about each episode in the show notes and follow us on social media by searching for @MoreOrLess, @DaveMorin, @Lesson, @JLesson, and as for me, I'm @Brit. See you guys next time.